Hi, everyone. I'm Artur. Welcome to Reimagine 2020. Today with me, I have Nick from Tellor, the only decentralized oracle. So definitely interested to learn more about how do the oracles actually fit into our sort of day-to-day usage of DeFi protocols, and also cover quite a lot of controversies in this space as well. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, we're just jumping right into the deep end. That's good.
Yeah, for sure. So, tell me, what is the purpose of an oracle? Why is it so important? I think everyone by now knows the definition, but what is the there's obviously so much more to it, right?
Yeah, so we sort of fell into the Oracle world. So before we were doing Teller, we were actually we started a decentralized derivatives protocol. So we started that in 2017. It was known as Daxia. We were going to do long and short tokens on like Bitcoin or gold, and it was sort of
Mm,
it was sort of a novel concept back in 2017, and now you hear a lot about it. But as you know, basically a derivative, you can boil it down to you're betting on the price of something.
mm,
It's basically what all of these contracts boil down to is, you're betting on the price of something. And the question always comes in, well, how do you get the price of that something? Because if you don't know the price, then you can't bet on it. And we realized that there was really no good way to do it in a decentralized manner. So if you if you have an Ethereum smart contract that says, pay this person if the price of Bitcoin goes up, or pay this person if the price of Bitcoin goes down, getting the price of Bitcoin into your smart contract is really tough because smart contracts on Ethereum can't read outside data. So they can't just go check Coinbase's API or Binance's API. It just has to do with the architectures of Ethereum in the system. And so you need a method to have somebody do it, and somebody actually has to manually place that in your contract. So you can do like the naive approach, and you can just have the company, so say us, manually enter the value. Well, that's not really good because then you're just trusting one person to enter the value, and they can change it if they're betting in the contracts. And there's, and the next best thing is you can say have some third party do it. There's third party services that do that, or you can have some third party service that's, say, a multi-sig wallet that has a bunch of different people doing it. Well, we actually created a method for doing it in what we like to say is the decentralized way, or you actually sort of create a crypto economics system for making sure that the data is actually accurate. Um, but yeah, so I think that's kind of the Oracle problem in general, is how do you get these sort of off-chain prices and off-chain information on-chain, and that's usually what's referred to as the Oracle problem.
and how does Tellor do it then?
So Teller's a little bit, we sort of go back to the roots of crypto as far as how things work. So, if you want to validate a piece of data, the best way to do it is just to have people compete to put it, to validate it, kind of back to the old Bitcoin concept. So we actually have a network of staked miners is what we like to call them. So if, let's say, you're running your derivatives contract and you want the price of Bitcoin, you come to Teller and you say, hey, I want the price of Bitcoin. And then we have a network of miners. What they have to do is they have to stake 1,000 of our tokens in a smart contract. And then they compete at a proof of work challenge. So similar to Bitcoin, where they solve for some nonce, they solve the meaningless proof of work challenge and they submit the solution to our Ethereum smart contract, in addition to the price of Bitcoin. And
Mm-hmm.
once they do that, then if they lied, say, let's say the price of Bitcoin they said was $10 million, somebody can initiate a dispute and say, hey, he lied, and then he can potentially lose his stake. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
relatively simple mechanism, but it doesn't require any central party to sort of be in the way. Anybody can participate and anybody can dispute. And that's the system that we
Mm-hmm.
have, and we've been up and running for over a year now.
And how's that been so far for the past year? Because I think, yeah, like nowadays, not too many protocols go down the road of mining. So how was that? What was that process actually like, kind of in the early days, like launching the basically who were the first miners? I'm assuming that you guys were, but how was that? How did that kind of like process flow?
It was super fun. So we launched in August of last year, and like we had like So like I was the first miner, and we had the team, and we just started passing it around to like our friends and people who would come to a meetup in like Willing. And like there was like a time in August where like our friends who were mining, they're like I'm spending like $20 a day in gas to mine, to get 100 of your tokens. Like, I don't know if this is necessarily worth it. But then like in September we got listed, so our first exchange was IDEX.
Hmm.
And it sort of started to take off once they could sell the tokens. And kind of mid-September, it got so competitive we lost the ability to mine our own coin, because the difficulty was so high.
What does that mean?
Well, so like in proof of work systems, it's sort of the
Hmm.
difficulty goes up, and uh, we didn't have enough GPU power to mine our own
Hmm.
coin. There was some serious bigwig GPU miners that started coming on board in September, and it was sort of a lot of even big CPU miners were coming on,
Hmm.
and that was pretty early. And then we had in November, December, so some of the pools started to come on board, and then by like
Hmm.
by March time, it was literally like all just giant, the hash pool, F2 pools, the big guys
Hmm.
there. And that's kind of where we're at now. Now it's FPGA pools,
Hmm.
not even GPU pools.
Wow.
So it's, it's been like a wild ride, but it's,
Mhm.
we did something different. So we didn't have like a pre-mine on our coin or anything. We just
Mhm.
sort of minted from zero. And the miners were really the first people who got access to the coins. And I think it really helped us because it was, miners are sort of awesome community members because they're like
Mhm.
actively doing something and downloading the code and trying to pay attention to everything that you're doing. Whereas a lot of
Mhm.
times like just normal speculators aren't really as engaged. So we had sort of a
Mhm.
community of like really technical people.
Mhm.
Everyone who bought our coin for the first 5 months bought it on a DEX. That's the only place we were listed. So you either bought it on a DEX or mined it. So it was it was a community of people that sort of knew
Mhm.
the space pretty well, and I think that really gave us an advantage, which was cool.
So I mean, I guess like then if you have like you mentioned like FPGA pools mining, then that's kind of the kind of like the ultimate validation to you as the builder, right? Now you're really in the sort of the big leagues in terms of also security of the network. Am I right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's there's like pros and cons. You like
Mhm.
the big pools and you like the big guys, but a lot of times, like it's always shocking to me, like whenever some of these big pools come on and like they don't even tell you, like you as the developer, they're just like, you just see like
Mhm.
like some new addresses are overtaking your
Mhm.
network's hash power, and you're like, they haven't reached out to me at all, as the lead developer in this protocol, and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars put towards this, and they don't even
Mhm.
reach out. And it's sort of cool to see that kind of, I guess that's
Mhm.
decentralization at its best, is whenever
Mhm.
people do it and don't have to tell you. So
Has there been any kind of events of some of these large miners trying to pull some like funny business around the network, or kind of like to try it, push it to its limits,
uh not necessarily with any of the really
either
large ones.
deliberately or not?
Yeah, so we've had some issues. So we have disputes on our network where if you lie,
Mhm.
you can get disputed. And like early on, like there were a lot, just because like people were writing their own code and not testing it. And
Mhm.
sometimes we even had some of those problems with really big pools, like where they would be like, usually whenever like they would get disputed, then they would come to me and they'd be like, hey, what happened? And I'd be like, you can
Mhm.
get disputed. And they'd be like, really? I had no idea. And I'd be like, well, are you running our miner? So like we have mining code up, and they're like, no,
Mhm.
we wrote our own. And I'm like, I can't help you guys. Like we literally put out a reference implementation. Can you guys like at least respond? But yeah, so every once in a while, we haven't really had anybody try to attack our network too much. Besides, like really early on, there was some funny business as far as people would try and find bugs in the miner code or in the contract code. But we had sort of dealt with that, kind of,
Mhm.
which was fun.
Got it, got it. And I guess like and now you guys have we've been working on and are, I guess, gearing up to release the version 2. So what have the main kind of learning points been over the past year for you?
You know, a lot of the learning points kind of go into just trying to get people to adopt the thing. You know, so we have this Oracle out there, and you want to get people to actually use it. And it's always, you sort of know it and you hear it, but you know, the development cycle on any project is a long time. So you know, like if you're a derivatives protocol, or you're a protocol that's starting to build, and you're looking at, you're like comparing different Oracle designs. You know, like if you're actually doing it properly, not one of these like DeFi protocols that launches in a week. You know, most of them, they take 6 months to launch. You know, they'll come to you, and they want to build it right, and they want to do an audit, and it's a lot of work. You know, it's a lot of kind of hand holding, and we've sort of had the opportunity to work with a lot of these teams, and you really get to understand what they want, because you know, like the actual number of builders and like serious projects in Ethereum, or kind of in crypto in general, like, you know, I'm sure you know, it's probably like, you know, under 100 like serious projects in the space. Like it's not massive. So you can really almost just have a relationship with every single one of them, and and know what they're building, and that's what we've been doing. And you know, so we found out, so a lot of them want, you have this kind of inherent pull between what the technology can actually do, and what customers and the users want. So you know, kind of like with Ethereum, everyone wants DeFi to be really fast and seamless, and finality to be instant, and it's almost like it's been a sort of our job as the oracle of decentralization to be like, no, like Ethereum itself can't do that, much less an oracle. Like you sort of need to slow down. But we did. So with V2, we sped up our block time. So now instead of taking 10 minutes to get your request back, now we're moving down to 5 minutes, where we're sort of 10xing the throughput in the network. And then we're just making some small changes to the dispute process as well, to sort of make it more secure. So those are some of the things that we're really excited about. Yeah, for this piece.
And how so today, what are the kind of I guess, how does Tellor work? What are the sort of are there any what kinds of data can I do you guys basically support today, and how does that like process work? You know, let's say that I want to start building using Tellor as an oracle, but I want, let's say, a data feed that is not currently being mined. Is that the right term?
Yeah, so we actually have all of the data stored off chain. So like what the data, the sort of definitions, you just get an ID on chain. And this was sort of a decision that we made, you know, so like ID1 is, the miners can sort of submit whatever they want for ID1, but like all the miners sort of collectively know that ID1 is the Bitcoin US dollar price. And that's good.
Okay.
So like if you wanted one, you would actually just make a pull request into the miner and say like, hey, we're adding this request ID means these things. And our data definitions are a little bit different than some other people. So like whenever you talk about an oracle, there's kind of a big difference in what the data actually is. So like if you have you know, the price of Bitcoin at Coinbase, the price of Bitcoin that you can trade $100,000 at right now, those are three different prices. You know, and you don't necessarily know which one you want, and you know, like a lot of oracles will say like, hey, we go and fetch an API endpoint for you, and that actually didn't fit what we were ultimately trying to do, because if you ultimately are just fetching one API endpoint, then it's actually centralized, because that API endpoint can censor you at any point in time.
Right,
so
right.
You don't want that. You don't want to have that risk. So whenever we say like the Bitcoin US dollar price, it's actually up to sort of, it's kind of this there's a lot of ambiguity in what that means. So the miner, if one of them wants to go to Coinbase, one of them wants to go to Binance, usually we tell them like, go to all of them and take a median. That way you don't get slashed. But yeah, that way it's sort of a definition that it can't be censored, and you know, you don't know which one you're actually getting it from.
And it's actually like it is like a very big deal. Like, you know, that when we're talking about essentially, you know, computers communicating with each other, and like you said, that there's, you know, let's say three different prices of Bitcoin, then obviously, and we're talking about, automating everything, then computers can't exactly, they're not going to meet up and, to kind of, so guys, which one was, which, when there's like, a misunderstanding that, okay, what should we go with? Or, which is the most applicable? This all needs to be, kind of like figured out ahead of time, right? So like these sort of like the potential like implications for kind of, for if there is like some sort of like mismatch can potentially be huge, right?
Yeah, but I think a lot of it goes into what kind of your vision for DeFi is.
Mhm.
Like sometimes if you are trading on a specific exchange, you need the specific price at that exchange, and like if you're trying to hedge some specific position, but at that point, like it's so overly specific, and obviously it's centralized with that exchange that you probably want a different tool to do it than say one on DeFi, at least in our opinion.
And what's your vision for DeFi?
Yeah, so I mean that's like now we're just getting into something completely different. I sort of differ with a lot of people. Like, we tell them like we want to build things that are slow and secure. DeFi, like it goes back to like, why are you building something on a blockchain? Like if you're building it on a blockchain, you're sort of okay with it being really, really slow and expensive. So you better really, really want it to be censorship resistant. That's like why, in our mind, why you would be building something on Ethereum or Bitcoin or one of these networks. So if the focus is right, that you're building this to be censorship resistant, then the products will also sort of fit that. And I think a lot of DeFi isn't doing that at the moment. They're trying to, what we see a lot of is people seeing, here's a cool idea that you can build in a centralized world, and now let's try and mimic it in this world a little bit, or like
it's kind of like this like faster horse sort of analogy, right? That like, we want to do exactly the same but better and on blockchain.
Yeah, and it's like, no, like you can sort of, like I'd say like even one of the problems with like the traditional world, like I'd say in the traditional world we have too much financialization in general. So like, like we probably don't need all of these financial hedging tools. We don't need faster, better stock trading. We don't need more high frequency traders. Like that's not what's missing. Like the spread is fine. Like it doesn't need to get smaller. Like if we would just slow down and then like actually like maybe, you own the house you live in and it's not mortgaged out to a million different banks and cut and splice, like it would be okay. Like it's not a bad thing. And I think like with blockchain, if we use it to like cut and splice every asset and financialize the entire world, like that's sort of a failure in my mind. I think it would be better if we use it to, hey, you can, there's the traditional tagline of bank the unbanked, or you can use it to actually just build tools that now nobody can sort of tell you can't do this, or nobody can shut you down if you're trying to take a position out on this. Like I think those are much more sort of noble use cases and ones that I think actually just fit better.
So your vision is more for DeFi to create a simpler world, not an even more complex.
Yeah, because it's like like everybody saw the dangers with the more complex world once it actually got adoption. So like whenever credit default swaps actually got adoption, or mortgage-backed securities actually got adoption, then everyone was like, oh man, like it's fine if one person is betting on my mortgage, but when the entire economy is betting on my mortgage, it's like not a good idea. And I think like, and you start to see it with Ethereum too, like whenever like one person is betting on like shit token prices, like that's cool, but if all of Ethereum is doing it, it sucks. And you have these like, yeah, it's just like problems with coordination, and that's, I hope that we can sort of just learn lessons, and let's like build something slower. Let's build something that actually means something, and let's think about what we're building and the consequences for the real economy, rather than just saying like we can do it, so let's do it. I think that's probably a wrong approach to take.
That's a great view, but and just to get a bit deeper into it. So what? So you're saying that that like blockchains should be kind of or things that are built on blockchains, and blockchains should be kind of slow and expensive. What do you see as the what would the kind of, in your opinion, the best sort of like the lowest hanging fruit like use cases then be? What should we really be like focusing on, in your opinion? If
You
you
know
could
what?
be Vitalik and commandeer the
Yeah,
direction of
no.
Ethereum.
Well, I mean, the vision of having like these computing blockchains is great, and you want it to sort of be open and censorship resistant. And I think there's a lot of value to that. You know, there doesn't necessarily have to just be one use case. Like I'm sort of a fan of,
Hmm.
I'm not a big fan of saying like one chain's going to rule them all. Like I'm fine with a whole bunch
Hmm.
of different chains, and we all have different use cases on them. You know, like the original, like I got into Bitcoin like with the original view of getting like decentralizing the money's supply, and like that's still a valid use case. You know, using it for payments and using it so that way, you know, like right now I'd say the big use case is like what in my mind the ones that have sort of found, like if you look at what has blockchain found a product market fit for at the moment, I would say like you have no KYC AML for transferring large amounts of value. Like Bitcoin sort of did that, and you know, same with storing value, and that's a good one. We're doing it great. You know, continuing to build upon that, and then Ethereum, you know, like you usually have to think about like what regulation are we arbitraging here, and like with Ethereum, like you had big SEC problems, like raising money and raising capital was there were onerous regulatory requirements, and we built ICOs, and it had a product market fit for sure. And I think no, and I think that's actually a really good thing. You know, like having the ability to sort of pay early users and things like that. You
Hmm.
can do something with that. You can actually create value by doing that. So you know, there's obviously a lot of now. It's just there's a lot of speculation, and it leads to a lot of money grabbing situations. But the general idea of you can do this without any regulations, and you can reward early members in some creative fashion, and sort of set your own inflation rate on how you do that. That's really powerful, and I think that's one that we've had. You know, as far as other ones, I think decentralized exchanges, to be honest, they're just about finding the product market fit. You know, the entire idea of non-custodial exchanges. I think that's one that's super awesome. I think that can take off. So you know, like I think that's sort of the one that we've been seeing recently, and then from there, you know, I
As
don't know.
AMM more specifically, right? Like this year has definitely been the sort of the year of Uniswap, Uniswaps, coming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of AMMs, to be honest.
Hmm.
It's you know, like whether it's an AMM or an order book based DEX,
Hmm.
you know, the ultimate thing. Like usually AMMs, you're just an automated, yeah, an AMM is just sort of a really lazy market maker on your exchange.
Hmm.
Like you just you like are just setting it like it's not that efficient. So I think you can
Hmm.
actually have better ways to do it. But you know, it makes it really simple for people to do and plan things. But I think ultimately like order books are probably the better option, especially once you get, you know, like true liquidity on something, like, and you actually have a use
Hmm.
case. Like I think now, you know, order books really dry up and everything like that on a lot of the traditional dexes, just because if everything is speculative, then it can sort of go away. But
Hmm.
once you sort of get beyond the speculative nature of it and you start getting into real use cases, then, you know, there is a buyer at a certain price. Like it's, you know, like
Hmm.
when you like with, like if you have like, you know, if you look at like the commodities markets or something like that, like corn and wheat and something like that, like somebody's always going to buy it if the price goes low enough. But you know,
Hmm.
like with yeah, like with some coin that doesn't mean anything, like there isn't always a buyer for it. There is no actual use case that somebody's using it for yet. So yeah, of course it can dry up, and you might want the promise that it won't dry up in your code on Uniswap.
Hmm. And you mentioned, so I guess like coming back to what we discussed like earlier, is that so like blockchains slow and expensive, and I think this is also really being kind of emphasized more and more as we sort of enter this sort of era of new gas, like where the new normal of gas prices. Does that impact Tellor as well? Like you mentioned before that it used to cost $20 in gas last year per day to mine.
Yeah, no, it
What is that
definitely.
like today?
So like every time you submit a mining solution, you have to pay, like it costs like 1 million gas to submit the final one, and
Okay.
you get about 2 Tellor reward. And luckily, like during this time of really high gas price, the TRB prices shot up. So like You know,
Mhm.
you submit a transaction that costs $1 million gas, and you get back, now our token price is $30, so you get back like $60. So it makes sense at
Mhm.
most gas prices, but then like whenever we shot up to like 400 GWh gas prices, it actually didn't make sense. So like now you
Mhm.
actually had to like, it was more expensive to submit the solution even when you would get the reward, and the
Mhm.
network kind of froze. And we actually have, so what we actually rely on in our system, so like if you want to, whenever you're requesting the Bitcoin data, if you want to request it, you have to pay a tip. So you have to,
Mhm.
you have to incentivize the miners to go get it. And if gas prices are really high, say it's an extra $20, you would actually just need to tip more to actually get them
Mhm.
to submit your data through. And that's why we built that mechanism in. And it's actually just that simple mechanism of like, you can pay the miner directly to mine your thing is actually pretty novel, because like a lot of other Oracle designs, you're like sort of relying on their good graces to push it through in high gas times.
Mhm.
We saw a lot of Oracles kind of,
And
yeah, fail along those lines
and
because they just didn't submit a high enough gas price.
hmm And before we definitely want to sort of hear your views of that, or like insights generally. But before we get into that, so you mentioned that it costs 1 million gas to submit basically a block on Tellor, for one miner to submit it. And so how many different, and if
There's,
it's 12 million gas per Ethereum block, right?
yeah, something like that now.
And and if a teller block is every 10 minutes, how many different miners do you have? I'm just thinking that then
So it's
it's
a
quite a
mil.
bit. It's quite a
Yeah.
few. You guys are. I'm just now like starting to kind of like understand how, like one's another side of how like the Ethereum network is getting like where the sort of how the usage, or like how the sort of like what the day-to-day usage is made up of, regardless of essentially like market movements. What the sort of like the basically, if you take all of the volatility out when like everyone starts moving their funds at the same time, but what is the sort of like how the base is made up of? Because it seems to me that, I mean, it's a quite a pretty heavy. You guys are quite a heavy user then of Ethereum as well.
Yeah, I mean, for before kind of the past few months, we were in the top 25 for gas users on Ethereum
Mm-hmm.
for like a 6 month time period. And
Mm-hmm.
now other protocols have kind of kicked us off, which is we're fine with.
Yeah,
But
it's not a competition.
yes, no, not at all. So yeah, no, we're definitely a high gas user. And we're definitely looking at ways to kind of reduce it. So we reduced it a little bit with V2, just kind of did some gas golfing. But yeah, I mean, we feel the pain. It's just honestly one of those things, like with an Oracle, if you need the price on chain, you have to submit a price on chain.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of, there's not many ways around that. Um, so like if like Chainlink, for instance, is they're one of the top gas users on the network, and they've
Mm-hmm.
consistently been so for over a year. And just because they're constantly pushing price updates, and you have to do that. That's why like ultimately, hopefully Tellor eventually gets a lot of usage, because the way that Tellor works is once the Ethereum price is on chain, then it's free for everyone to use, which kind of is different
Mm-hmm.
from other oracles. So like
Mm-hmm.
if your smart contract wants the Ethereum US dollar price, but somebody else already put it up on chain, you don't have to request it again. You can just use it.
Mm-hmm.
So like
I
we,
think this would actually be very interesting to understand. Let's say to me as an Ethereum DApp builder, what are like the fundamental kind of like differences to, for example, using Tellor as an oracle, to using Chainlink as an oracle, and using Band as an oracle? What are, like you mentioned that, so Tellor is or yeah.
uh so I can't really speak to Band. I don't,
Mhm.
I,
Sure, of course.
yeah, no, I knew their original design, and then they changed it, and I haven't done the research again.
That's
Uh,
fair.
yeah. Um, so no, but Chainlink, so Chainlink's price reference data, that's usually the one that, that's actually the one that's live at the moment. So basically the way that they work, uh, they have a smart contract, and they have a whole bunch of providers that are whitelisted providers by Chainlink, and they submit the data to the smart contract. Um, as far as using it, there's probably not going to be much of a difference in terms of actually just interacting with it from your smart contract basis. But in terms of like cost and speed and some resilience, I think that's where you're going to get some of the difference. So, cost, so Tellor's more based upon how much usage there is on Tellor. So we're kind of, if there's not a whole lot of usage at any given time, it's really cheap. And then if there's more, it's kind of the Ethereum gas model for how expensive it is. Whereas Chainlink, you have to go sign a document offline and pay for them however much they charge to get data into your smart contract.
Really?
Yeah. So, like we don't, I don't think any of the contracts are really open as far as how much people pay. People kind of speculate looking at wallets, but that's about it. And
this is something that kind of, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't get covered that much.
yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things like we're speculating too. They don't necessarily speak too openly about it. But so it's, they have a bunch of whitelisted nodes, and that's kind of the big piece, because you're really just relying on Chainlink that they don't sort of unwhitelist everyone and walk away. So there's sort of a centralization point there. And that's probably the big difference. And then they also, like you're sort of relying on the good graces of them. They promise that they're going to update their smart contracts at a certain time, but like there's not really a crypto economic incentive for them to do so. You don't. It's sort of you signed an agreement with them, and you're going to hope that they fulfill it. So that's kind of the big differences. Whereas ours is mostly on chain, and they have some off chain pieces.
And but one more kind of like, I guess, like criticism I've heard is that like this kind of like the concept of like decentralizing this oracle, that from some point there isn't that big of like the return is like diminishing from adding another like validator if everyone is still pulling their price from the Coinbase API. Like that, what's the point of adding a new validator who does exactly the same thing as everyone else is doing, and if the data feed is still coming from Coinbase?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the point. Like if you have one choke point, like why not just make it the oracle? Like, no, I would agree. Like it's always that way. Like you're only as decentralized as your least decentralized point. So like, no need to sort of paper over with all of these other things. And like I think like their response would be like, well, it's in preparation for like whenever the staking and all of the decentralization pieces are live. But it's we don't know. So that's the best answer I can give.
It's a good answer. What are your thoughts on, so you mentioned, blockchain's slow. What are your thoughts on the kind of ambitions to create these fast blockchains? I think especially, like Solana is the sort of newest on the block.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm curious to see where it goes, because it's one of those things like if you have enough people move over there and enough people stake and decentralize, then it sort of makes sense. There's always sort of the, like we're definitely keeping an eye open for a lot of them. So, we've talked with people who want us over on these different chains, and we just want to make sure it makes sense, because if you have a centralized chain, then it doesn't really make sense to have a decentralized oracle on it. So like we don't necessarily want to do that. And then usually the first thing
they have 100 validators.
Yeah, well, I mean, validators are meaningless, like numbers. Like, I mean, that's like, we could have 1 million staked miners if we just print ourselves tokens. Like you don't know. Like the only way, like, kind of like you just have to go back to like the old thing. Like it's, how long have you been live and how much money do you have secured? Like that's like the only thing that really matters. Like any of these blockchains that have launched a month ago, it's like, can you call us in 3 months or something like that? Like it's, they're just so new. You don't necessarily know. I think it's, whenever you're so new like that, you really just have to look at, like I like to just think about like, what do you like the team? Do you like the philosophy? Like, why are they building it? Things like that. It's still that early for a lot of these chains, because it's just, I mean, you don't know who the miners are. You don't know who the validators are. And anytime, I mean, anything like if you actually had you know, 8 really decentralized nodes, like that would be fine.
Hmm.
You know, like it's not like a numbers game. Like it's, you want it to be a certain philosophy of the community. You want it to go through some hard fork decisions. You want it to go through a hack or two, and then you sort of feel comfortable with how decentralized it is. You know, like if somebody goes and steals, $1 million worth of the team's money and they can't roll it back, like, all right, now we feel good about this chain. Like now it feels decentralized. But yeah.
um, would you add fees to that list as well? Because like one of the things that is as well is like kind of with or that we've debated on internally is that, like, if something is, if you're getting essentially like, near free transactions, then where's the security coming from? Like, like what are your thoughts there? Should
Yeah, I
a
mean,
kind of like a blockchain be, you mentioned, I think, expensive, right? So
yeah, I mean, you have to look at the fees. Obviously if it's near free, like, there's probably not a whole lot of usage, and most of the times, like, it's fine because, like, the security, so like even the security in Bitcoin or the security in Ethereum, a lot of it just comes from speculation. Like you don't need, Ethereum had really low fees for a long time, and you had really high security because the minting, you have mining rewards and you have speculators so it's sort of, you're bootstrapping security by doing that, and that can work for a long period of time. So that's not necessarily a problem as far as the security piece goes, but ultimately, like, once you're live for a few years, like, you want to see some fees in the network. And like that, anytime you talk about these fast blockchains though, like, I don't think any of them have solved the gas problem as much as they would like. Like, even if Ethereum, to be honest, like, I think if Ethereum scaled 1,000x, I think in a year we'd fill it up and the gas prices would be right where they're at. It's just, I think the demand would meet it. And you could, like, kick the can down the road for a year or two, but um, ultimately, like, it's going to be high value use cases and things like that. It's just, you're not going to get a whole lot. And with these fast blockchains, I think a lot of people aren't, one of the biggest problems actually on Ethereum concerning the decentralization is actually just the node decentralization. So, like, I'm sure, like, everybody just uses Infura, and nobody runs a full node because it's ridiculously hard, and you can barely do it on a computer now. Like, you have to have a supercomputer to run an archive node. So, think
I
about
mean,
if at
some of
the,
those like user stories of people that have been like mining Bitcoin for years, and then how they tried to set it up. I mean, to be honest, it's quite scary. Like, how they've, like, tried and failed to set up a full Ethereum node.
yeah. And then, I mean, like, and that's like Ethereum. Like, so think about if your state is growing way faster, or you have, like, a lot of these other things. Like, I'm concerned with how the nodes are going to look, and how much data you're going to have to be storing, and what the requirements hardware wise are going to be, just because, if you want decentralization, you ideally want every single person running a node. You want a whole lot of nodes, and you want a whole lot of miners, and um, it makes it really hard. And I think that's like something that, sure, Solana has 100 validators, but, like, what's that going to look
Each
like?
one of those is basically like a supercomputer, right?
Yeah, like, what's that going to look like in 3 years? Like, is it going to be? Can anyone run a node? Like, I don't know.
110.
Yeah, like, you don't know, and that might be an issue. So, like, you don't want these Infura chains. Like, that's probably my biggest criticism of Ethereum at the moment. I think would be a lot of, and I know people are working on it though. Like, there's
Mhm.
people who are working on having, like, if you're running a light client, you can sort of contribute to a full node security or something like that. So, um, there's a lot of research going in there, but yeah, it's definitely, you want to have more people doing things, and that's one of the, now we can even, like, step back from, like, what the vision for DeFi is on this, and it's like, what's the vision for blockchain in general? And, like, I don't think you need to have blockchain supporting, the masses. Like, I don't think every single person needs to be using Ethereum, or every single person needs to be using one of these technologies. Like, it's fine if it's a little bit hard to set up and it's a little bit slow and things like that. Like, just the fact that it's there and you can use it sort of preserves freedom in general. So, like, I actually pointed to, like with kind of the whole Tor system for music. So like just the fact that you can go pirate music actually makes music cheaper. So like it's that limit there that sort of is the check on people making music really expensive. And as long as you sort of have that ability, then it sort of prevents these oligopoly rents from taking place. So that's why I think like with Ethereum and with Bitcoin, if you have the option to do, trustless banking, and you have the option to store your value in these other assets, that in and of itself prevents the state from sort of pissing people off and stealing all their money. So yeah.
It's a pretty good view. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on that? So I guess you mentioned, that very few people run full nodes, and that it's a kind of ever growing problem. What are your thoughts on the sort of some of the the layer 2 solutions that are coming out, and some of like the sort of like more innovative sides from there, like ZK rollups and stuff?
I think they're very promising. You can do a lot with it. It's just a lot of it's really early research still. Like I remember in whatever 2018 we were all talking about plasma, how it was going to be the savior of Ethereum, and here we are. It sort of failed to live up, and I think a lot of it too, like with the ZK rollups, like it's still really complex to use, and people aren't really used to it. So I think it's just going to take some time to sort of get adoption with any of these things. Like, you look at like kind of like I was talking about, like AMMs taking off, like they're taking off because like it's simple and easy to understand. What's going on. People inherently like to be able to understand things, especially in this space, because there's so much. We all went through like the ICO bubble and things like that. There's so much hand waving over the technology that it would just actually be nice to actually understand how it works and get a grip on it. So making sure that your protocol can be understood is really big. And then whenever you add like, we're going to do a ZK rollup into a plasma chain or something like that, people are just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm out. So yeah.
I'm totally blanking on the name right now, but there was and it's someone was telling me how it's like surprising how it's not really talked about that much. But there was a successful plasma chain. I'm totally blanking what the name of it was. It was the one focused on gaming, which I think had like this crypto zombies running on it and so on. It wasn't Keep, or it's like 4-letter word. But anyways. I guess sort of like moving back to sort of to Tellor specifically. So what does Tellor kind of need help with today the most, and sort of I guess for the next couple of months?
So it looks like gas prices have come down a bit, which is awesome. So like we were like really worried there. We were like, oh man, if gas prices go up to 1,000 and stay there for 3 months, like everybody on Ethereum is going to be bailing ship looking for another chain. But luckily,
what would the second chain be for you today if you had to build on one?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, a lot of people have moved to like just usually a layer 2 is the quickest one to go to. So like a Matic or an XDAI or something like that. Just going to keep things going along. Usually it's easy to follow where your users want to go and where people are going. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's going to be like, if there ever is a crisis, it's going to be, you better be Solidity compatible, because we're not going to be able to rewrite everything. But yeah, I mean, so Tellor, right now we're relaunching our V2. We'd love to, if you're building and you need an Oracle, let us know. We'd love to kind of talk through. We love walking through and building those things. So we're trying to find a lot of customers. We're also hiring. So, we're trying to expand the team, trying to find good developers in the space who want to build cool things that actually make sense. That's kind of where we're at right now, is focusing on trying to find the real users and really just support them wholeheartedly in what they're building.
How do you, so actually be interested to know about that. How do you find the sort of the hiring process and the kind of like talent market right now, especially like for protocols such as yourself? Do you guys do you have like a hard requirement for do you only look for like blockchain and crypto developers, or is that?
Most of the time we want that, just because I think we want people who sort of, you want the cultural fit to be right first. You know,
Mhm.
you don't want, yeah, I mean, you don't want somebody who's just a developer who's in it for a job. Like ideally we'd want
Mhm.
people who are passionate about this, who are passionate about, you know, why we're building on Ethereum, why we're building these things. And because that's going to be the employees that, you know, can stick through the next bear market or something like that. So, you know, we want to make sure that we try and find those right cultural fits first of all. And then, you know, as far as, but, you know, at the same time, like, we are open to hiring normal developers if it's, um, just kind of if the person's right. I guess it's a kind of wishy-washy
Mhm.
answer, but it's tough, you know. And yeah, I mean, like, so we're actually right outside, we're outside of Washington, DC, here in the US. And so the three founders, we all knew each other in person before we started Tellor. Um, and then we actually just hired our first external hire last month.
Mhm.
He lives in Brazil. So
I was just gonna ask whether you guys have gone. You know, are you remote or
yeah, well,
based
everyone,
in Washington? Mhm.
yeah, so we're remote, just due to COVID. But it looks like, you know, we're sort of open to being remote for a long time, and remote because there's, to be honest, Washington DC is not sort of a hotbed for blockchain developers. Uh,
It's not really known for that. I'm gonna say, yeah.
yeah. Well, there's actually a lot of so government contractors. So there's a whole bunch of people who know IBM Hyperledger, and
Hmm.
then, you know, like, which doesn't necessarily
I'm
help
sure
with
that's
the,
helpful for your hiring.
yeah, not really. So, you know, we
You
like
mentioned the
to,
culture fit side, right?
yeah, like, we don't need a IBM Hyperledger developer or anything like that. We want somebody who, you know, has a passion for it, and that's what we're looking for. And, you know, obviously there's now four of us on the team, so it's just somebody who's flexible, somebody who wants to just do a deep dive into everything in the space. So
And you mentioned you are still actively hiring.
yes, yeah. So whenever this comes out, we will be. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of just across the board. We're actively hiring, and hopefully the DeFi boom can continue and we can keep it up.
Is Tellor's kind of focus mainly for what's the kind of like the ideal sort of like use cases of Tellor? Is it like DeFi apps? Can it also, or is your vision also like non-financial apps? Let's say like, I don't know, like betting or something like that, or
Yeah, I mean, I think the broad categories would be, you know, there's like derivatives, stable coins would be one, and then kind of insurance protocols,
Mhm.
and then obviously like gambling pieces as well. But, you know, just those would be kind of the next pieces, and those would be the ones that we want to sort of find and support the right teams building them.
Mhm.
You know, we built Tellor because we didn't like the oracles in the space. And, you know, that's like, we always tell people, like, you know, if we actually have enough money just from the token price going up, like, we'll build some of the protocols we want to see in the space. And, you know, hopefully we can hire and do that.
That's awesome, and I mean, like, you know, such a great journey you've sort of you've had so far as well. Um, I mean, I know you're super busy. Just a couple of sort of let's call them rapid fire questions to sort of to get for our compilation we're putting together as well. If you had to say yes or no, will ETH 2.0 staking come out this year?
No.
If you had to describe DeFi in one word, you can take your time.
Um, Define one word. Yeah, I mean, it's just fun. I think that's fun is
That's
definitely
a good
the
one.
word. Yeah, it's been a blast. It's People are crazy.
Yeah, no, actually, I don't think I've had a single duplicate answer there. So it's
Nice.
kind of it's pretty good. Anyways, thank you so much, Nicholas from Tellor. This has been an awesome conversation, and wish you the best of luck with the version 2 and the vision of Tellor.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So hopefully I can talk to you again soon.